All right, ladies and gentlemen. Usually on Sportswire Radio on a Sunday night, we're talking all things related here to the world of wrestling, but we take a step back from that. Maybe I'll bring out the chairs. Maybe I'll bring out the tables later on for our guests, but in a different way. But we're going to go back to my roots almost in the world of college basketball and talk with a man that just a few short weeks ago reached out to me about an interview I did months ago with one of his former teammates and get his side of the story and talk about his own unique journey in the world of college basketball, where this gentleman scored 1,000 points in just over 71 games, but did that in not one, not two, but three schools. He played in three schools, but he still got 1,000 points. And oh, by the way, he only scored 30 points, 6 straight games. During his 2019-20 season over at SUNY Adirondack, he was the NJCAA Player of the Week that year late in the season. He also averaged nearly 30 points a game that season, but he was also, most notably, an important late season acquisition for the 2021-2022 York Cardinals men's basketball team, which had their most successful season in years, winning their first playoff game and the following season returning to the playoffs. And boy, were they a tough out. And I watched them play against my John Jay College men's basketball team a few times. I watched them play against the likes of Baruch. I watched them play against Lehman, CCNY, Brooklyn College. And this guy was a huge part of those two teams. And many of his players I've had on this platform, and some players he played against I've actually had on this platform, and he's going to talk about that. And what a small world. And oh, by the way, his head coach at the time there, Mr. Jamel Gist, a man that is no stranger to this platform, has been here many times. I'm going to talk about that, and maybe even the man that recruited him to York, and plus, who knows whatever else is on his mind. Now, I know our guest is saying, boy, this is a long introduction. I can't wait to talk. Well, we do things a little different here on this podcast compared to most other podcasts because we are live on the World Wide Web. So I'm going to give you that introduction that so many of your peers have gotten, and you should have got more over at those home games at York, because I'm going to give you that introduction that's going to seem like you're almost at Madison Square Garden playing for the Knicks, and maybe they could use you out there to finish off the 76ers. I'll get to that here and some. But ladies and gentlemen, we are live on Sportswire Radio, where all sports matters, and I want to bring on our guest here because it's very rare that we get a chance to talk to a 1,000-point scorer. It's very rare we get to talk to somebody with a pedigree that this man has straight from the Bronx, of course, one of our 5 boroughs here in the city of New York, my hometown. So let's get right to it here on a Sunday night on Sportswire Radio, where it feels like the playoffs here. And certainly, let's go give him that introduction that we're waiting for. So with that, wait for it. Further ado here on the Sports Report. Number one. Global Sports Show. 1,000-point plus scorer. Played for not one, not two, but 3 schools. Most notably for SUNY Adirondack, where he was the NJCAA Player of the Week in early 2020. Scored 30 points, 6 consecutive games. One of the top scorers in the nation in the NJCAA in 2020. And was a part of not one, but 2 teams for the York Cardinals that went to the CUNYAC playoffs and won their first postseason game in over 5 years. Let's bring him on here. His name is Mr. Tavon. My friend, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I don't think you got those too often in the CUNY, if I'm pretty sure. I'm actually
You said what?
You didn't get those intros too often in the CUNY Athletic Conference, I said.
Nah, not the CUNY.
No, definitely not in the CUNY, that's for sure. You were lucky after your games got televised at York. But it's a different conversation for a different time. I certainly like to have fun. But Tavon, what an honor it is to have you. I will certainly get to some comments. I know many of my wrestling fans are like, Tom, what's going on here? I want to talk about something else. But we'll definitely, I'm sure, get to them and say hello. But Tavon, it's an absolute honor to have you. And I'm almost kind of perplexed on where to start. But maybe I will go and kind of maybe go right off the top. And for those that are listening and watching on Sportzwire Radio, where all wrestling matters, but also where all sports matters, tell us, what did it mean to you to conclude your career, which led you to not one, not two, but three schools and score 1,000? That's right, 1,000 points.
That really meant a lot because not a lot of people score 1,000 points from my neighborhood. I'm one of the selected few who have done that at any level, high school, college. So that meant a lot to me. That was part of my main goal of finishing out. I seen I was close to doing that, so that's something that I wanted to do.
Did you know, obviously, you as a player changed a little bit from Adirondack to York. Obviously, you had a cup of coffee at Morrisville, and I'll talk about that for sure. But you had to change as a player from when you started to get there. Talk to me about how you were able to make that adjustment.
Um, it was hard because I was used to being the main focus for my last 2 seasons of basketball. So making that adjustment and coming from Morrisville, I was the second leading scorer while I was there.
Yep.
So yeah, so it was kind of difficult because it was I was actually winning. When I got to York, I didn't really experience the losing part at York. So as soon as I got there, I was
Oh,
winning.
I watched York before you came there. I
Yeah,
watched some bad York teams. I watched
yeah. So I never experienced the losing part, which I'm grateful for, and that's what I thank them for. After coming from SUNY Adirondack, where I was losing a lot of games, so coming from there it was difficult, but I couldn't really say much or really do too much to throw the team off because we were winning games. So I didn't want to. It was difficult because I didn't know if I should take this shot. I didn't know if I should make this pass to this person. I didn't know if I should even speak up and tell somebody where to be on the court because I was a new addition to the team at the time. So it was kind of hard for me to break my shell and just accept the lower role to win the game. And I was kind of quiet, and they wanted me to speak up more. So that was kind of like the main thing.
That's so interesting. And, you had such an interesting journey. And we were speaking about this off the air. And obviously, Coach Gist, I've known for a long time. And I've had him on. And if I recall correctly, your name was brought up because there was a couple of players that came on in the second half of that season. And, that's very rare that players kind of come in to the second half of the semester and not only come on, but also are huge keys to a team that has success. I mean, did you know that you were going to come into York and kind of, I don't want to say put the team over the top, but played a huge role in that team's success? Because it's very rare for, again, at this level, to have somebody come in and then come into a role and then be a part of a team that goes to the postseason and, has some success. I mean, talk me through your thoughts about that.
I knew that was the plan to go into your talking to the coaching staff. The plan was to go in there and make an impact. But did I actually think that I was going to make an impact? Not really, because I'm just looking at our team on paper. I'm looking at everybody that could do what I could do. So it's like at the time I'm like, all right, what am I gonna do to help? We have Donald Hawley, we have Karan Dublin, we have Devon Chisholm.
Who I know very well. He's been here,
Yeah,
obviously.
so it's like all of them, we all do the same things. So it's like, what can I do to help? Like they say, I'm gonna put them over the top. What I'm gonna do so different that's gonna put them over the top? What do they see in me that's gonna that's not put them over the top, but that's gonna be a key addition to the team. That's gonna have a major impact. And even at the time, I didn't really notice it because I'm so used to putting big numbers. So at the time, while I was making that impact, I didn't realize it until after.
But could you have also said, maybe hypothetically, that you also were coming to a team that looked at you and said, you know what, you could give us depth. You could give us something that we've struggled before, but there was a lot of momentum at York because I remember having Jamel come on here, even going back probably during COVID, and there was a lot of promise still with the team. A lot of these players, you mentioned Karan Dublin, you obviously mentioned Divine Chills and Donald Hartley Jr., and those guys were starting to mature. Those guys had learned from the 2019-20 year and 2018-19, and so especially more Hartley and obviously Divine. And now they're sort of at a moment where they can win. And you were kind of, maybe they looked at you as a player that could give them some depth and maybe help them, as I stated, get them over the finish line. Do you think that they looked at you in that way?
Oh, maybe. I'm not too sure. I never really had that conversation with them. I would say so because we did a lot of running. When I got there, we did a lot more running than they usually do. They said that I could, because we were winning, so we were trying to stay in shape too. Trying to make
Well, Jamel likes to run up. If you knew anything about Jamel as a player, Jamel loved to basically go up and down the court. I mean, he was Showtime. When he played at Brooklyn College with Pops and Exxon John Balaz, those guys were basically like, they played like an NBA style. So those, he loved to run, Coach Gist.
Yeah, so the coaching staff actually told me that they could finally play fully how they really run the play, which is up and down, because I was another guard that they could add into the lineup and help them out with the ball handling and with other things, defense. That was things like in that matter.
Fair enough. And obviously, again, I could certainly see, some of those things there that played out. And, you had a lot of success. And I'll talk about some of the success at Adirondack for sure. And I want to say hello to one of my friends out there, Mr. C2K. Obviously, he's listening, and he said he wanted to give you a lot of respect. He said 1,000 points is very impressive. Definitely 1,000 points at any level is very impressive. Trust me, as I have done a lot of college basketball, I've been friends with a lot of guys that play in the game. 1,000 points is not easy, and especially your journey that took you to 3 schools. But, did you feel individual pressure, not so much from a statistical standpoint, because obviously you had accomplished a lot, but you didn't win in Adirondack. Obviously, Morrisville, you're there for a cup of coffee. I really can't count that. But when it came to, let's say, going to York, where obviously Nolan Adams was there, Jamel was taking over, Thomas Guerin, we're going to definitely get to him because he's kind of probably an important reason for a number of things that I'll shortly talk about over the while. But do you feel individual pressure also that you were, even though successful personally, you didn't win, and that you were coming to a team that, probably had more of a chance to win than, let's say, anywhere else you played, at least at Adirondack? Did you have an individual pressure on you to go there and win?
My only individual pressure was I wanted to win the championship. That was the main thing. That was the only real goal behind in front of the 1,000, being 1,000, reaching my 1,000 points. My only pressure was for my neighborhood because I wanted to win for where I'm from. It's big that we win championships. We all about number one where I'm from in my neighborhood. So that was real my personal pressure. Because I was lost and I put up the big numbers. So it was like, I don't want to.
Well, you know what? I'd love to hear for the audience because I know where you're from, but I have people out there that listen to me all over the world. I have a lot of wrestlers who are from different parts of the world, and they're like, Tom, well, what's he talking about? So talk to the audience on where you're from, actually, and, what was the humble beginnings of Mr. 1,000 point scorer, Tavon Price?
I'm from the Soundview section of the Bronx. So it's real hard over here because of the violence. The violence is high over here. So growing up, is either you play basketball or be in the street. So luckily, I chose the basketball route. I went to college. I did what I had to do. Had good grades. I graduated high school with honors. So yeah, I did that. That's my humble beginnings. It's really still violent, even for us, even being from a certain neighborhood. Even though you play basketball, you still gotta move a certain way, walk a different route to go to the basketball court, go to a different basketball court because of certain violence, because it's just a neighborhood. Somebody from a different neighborhood know you from that area, so they'll bother you. So it was real tough making it out of where I'm from.
How did that, in terms of just your, growing up, how did that motivate you to kind of, get away from that, because that's obviously a lot. That's a challenge. That's, I wouldn't know that challenge. And, I mean, our wrestlers are going to have different challenges. I mean, they certainly deal with challenges every time being in the ring, but that's a different challenge than what you went through. So how did you use that in terms of helping you to what the success that you had in your career?
Um, I just told myself growing up, no matter what level I go, either Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, that I did not want to be in the Bronx or New York City for school. And it's just ironic how I end up at York at a CUNY school to end my career. But that was just my goal: be good enough to a coach that's not in New York City wants you. So that's just what I want to do.
Well, that's interesting, because again, you actually started upstate, and then you sort of moved in the middle of the state. Then you came down to Queens. But to be fair, York is certainly, for most people in New York City, York is kind of what they would call the outer boroughs. I mean, York is sort of has more in common with, let's say, places such as parts of Brooklyn, parts of Staten Island, and certainly parts of the Bronx even. So that's interesting there. I want to say hello to some people here. Obviously, C2K, who has his own show, says he has 1,000 points is very impressive. Yes, it is, absolutely. Want to say hello to my guest coming up this Saturday night. He is going to go into the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. His name is Craven Rage. They call him now the Backyard Nightmare. They might call you the Nightmare on the court to be guarded from. But he wanted to say for you, who is your favorite NBA player? It could be any player. It doesn't even have to be LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. Do you have a favorite NBA player, or two that you
LeBron.
had growing up?
It's LeBron.
Okay, well, LeBron is still playing. I mean, he's still,
Yeah.
he's still out there, and the Lakers survive and play another game. So LeBron was your
And,
all-time. Was there any other players that you idolized growing up and such?
Allen Iverson.
Love Allen Iverson. Yep,
Yes. So just
love
them two,
Allen.
those really my guys, and Kyrie Irving, my guy now. So
Oh, I was watching actually before we were on the air. I was watching Clippers Mavericks, and the Clippers had a 31-point lead, and Dallas took the lead, and it was going down to the wire, and that was some game, and I was really like, wow, I was almost like, am I going to go to double overtime here and such? But
I wish it would have.
well, then I wouldn't have you on the air at 8 o'clock. I'm going to have you at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I wanted you here. But I definitely do agree with you on, a lot of those things there. But
Yeah.
obviously, I could see a lot of similarities. But okay, so you obviously you have that journey, and then talk to me about what led you into, let's say, first of all, going into SUNY Adirondack, and you go there, and we'll talk about some of the success. So obviously you're playing in the Bronx, and you're from Soundview, and I automatically, for whatever reason, think about the video. It's Uptown Deja Vu, Peter Guns, for whatever reason, Soundview. So you must be impressed that I actually knew that, but I actually have a background in music. So I actually I have an interesting background. I'm actually friends with a guy that his name is Lawrence Michaels. He was actually friends with the guy who's playing Richard Simmons now, Paulie Shore, but different conversation for a different time. But, so what led you then to go from Soundview all the way to another part of the state? What was that reason?
That was a time that I had a friend. He was going to SUNY Adirondack. Actually, his name is Damani Smith. He was
Okay.
actually one of the best players on the team there at the time, and I was talking to him, and they needed a guard at the time. So, and they was in a coaching change, so that was kind of tough too. But when they got their coach, his name is Rakim Hollis. He
Yep.
actually gave me a call, actually. So Damani had plugged me in actually to go there because I was looking for a school also that I could fit in, be a major impact in. At that time, I didn't really care. I don't want to say I didn't care about winning, but at that time, it's JUCO, it's junior college. So you still want to go to the next level. So my main focus was going to a school where I could get a 4-year school out of.
Sure, and I'm curious for the audience. And Craven Rage says he sees Allen Iverson and you and LeBron James. Well, Craven, you got to go watch some of the footages. I actually covered this guy, watched him throughout his career in New York. I saw you in New York. I didn't see you as much in Adirondack, but I know the player you are, and I definitely have a very good, vivid memory of those New York teams for sure. But talk to me about when you get to Adirondack. Was that a culture shock coming from the Bronx when you went up there? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was really different. It was really different, but I mean, growing up, my coach, his name is Mike B, my middle school coach trainer. He always taught us how to conduct ourselves in different environments. If people want to talk to us like in the office setting, how to separate ourselves, what not to say, what to say when you're saying too much, things like that. So
Sure.
it was hard just because I'm used to seeing people, everybody like me, dressed like me. I'm not used to seeing everybody walking around in slippers and shorts. Yeah, so
On a personal note, I actually hate when people walk outside and don't have like socks on. They have like those sandals or those
yeah,
slippers. I
see,
personally hate that.
so yeah, it was kind of different, but I actually adapted to that. So
Really? Okay.
I ended up going to class every slippers all the time. Like, I barely wore
Re-
sneakers to school.
So you did, it's funny you said that because see, now this is where I would have some similarity because I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So obviously,
Mhm.
Brooklyn and the Bronx, there's some similarities. My upbringing was not as the same as yours, but I still could relate to the fact you're going outside and you're on the hard pavement in the ground. Everybody's wearing sneakers in New York or boots, and you go there, you're in the middle of to most people the boondocks, and then you eventually adjust to that. I mean, what made you want to adjust to that after not wanting to kind of take part in that almost with the whole, style and such?
I just seen everybody was comfortable, and I'm like, I'm not. I had to tell myself, you're not in the Bronx no more. You gotta get comfortable. You gotta adapt. You gotta. This is where you gonna be at for the next 2 years. So you ain't
Did,
about. You're not about to walk it through campus in sneakers every single day. Get comfortable.
okay, so let me ask you a question conversely. Did you maybe feel more comfortable because you talked about growing up in the Bronx, right? You talked about growing up in Soundview. Now, for the audience that may or may not know this, that was an area that I believe at one time it was then President Jimmy Carter had walked through, and it was basically the area that was abandoned, and people were like, "This is almost like a war zone." So where you grew up was probably one of the toughest places in America, the United States of America, to grow up. You dealt with drugs, you dealt with gangs, you dealt with violence. It was a very hard upbringing. Basically, you went outside every day and you certainly had a lot of challenges. So, but then you go to another place that's, probably could be more in common with, let's say, a television show, more or less
Yeah,
what you see like in suburban, white America. I mean, so in a way, did that make you more comfortable because you dealt with all these things from probably the minute you were born, you grew up, and then to okay, you leave that, but maybe you didn't have to deal with that pressure anymore, and maybe it made you feel more comfortable, which allowed you to, kind of adapt to your settings and eventually get on the court and crush it.
that's. I can't even explain it any better. That's exactly.
Well, that's why I've been doing this a long time, and that's why I was telling you off the air. I'm kind of like the voice of, the backyard wrestling world. I was telling you, I'm almost like the Howard Stern of backyard wrestling. So we kind of know how
Yeah,
to phrase these things.
that was
But
exactly it. When you go to school and you don't got to worry about literally no violence at all, you're fine. All you gotta do is focus on school and basketball, then you should have no problems.
well, you definitely, you didn't, and I want people to follow Tavon right here on Instagram. You make sure you follow him because if you don't, he's going to come on the court and he's going to definitely drop at least maybe 38 or 39 on you for sure. But my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice of all sports. Here's All Sports Matter. That is our links here on Sportswire Radio. Check us out. I actually run an internet radio station, which we're live right now on the air. So let me ask you that. I want to talk about on the court in a second, but in terms of what was the life out there like? I mean, in terms of what were some of the things you like to do? Obviously, you were in class. You obviously, were there for a couple years. You had a lot of success on the court. But in terms of what was the experience of going to upstate, and what were some of the things you like doing over there that maybe you didn't get a chance to in the Bronx, but got a chance to do up there? What were some of the things you enjoyed doing up there?
The most thing, and it's gonna sound crazy because I'm already a basketball player. Not crazy, but it's gonna sound like, all right, that's so regular. But we don't have a lot of gym access in New York City, which is really sad for our kids coming up. If you don't have a big name now in New York City, it's hard to get a gym. So I really was dedicating all my time to the gym, for real, for real. There was nothing else really to do up there, especially in that school. I was in Glens Falls,
Yep.
Queensbury, New York. So it's not really a party town. You party.
No, it's a fact. If I'm not mistaken, that was near where the Olympics were in 1980. If I'm not mistaken,
Probably,
Glen
yeah. So you can't really party up there. They're gonna tell you shut it down. So it was like, all right, go to the gym. That's it.
And famously, again, some of my wrestlers listening are like, boy, Tom, you're really mixing wrestling. But Glen Falls, New York is actually famous for, there was a wrestler, a legendary wrestler named Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He's actually from Glen Falls, New York. So that's a wrestling the connection there for some of my fans. But the weather, though, but the winters, how did you adjust to the winter up there? Because the winter up there is, I mean, it gets bad here in New York City, but it's another world up there in Glen Falls. Let me tell you, that I know.
That's funny because the winter up there, all I did was add a coat and I kept my slippers on. Everybody had their slippers on, Crocs to be exact, and that's the funny thing.
Oh my God, I wouldn't even wear Crocs. You couldn't pay me. Listen, I have never worn slippers or sandals in my life. I remember one year as a kid, my mother for Christmas got me Mets slippers. I never even wore them. So wow, you got, even in the winter you were wearing those Crocs.
In the winter, yes, in the winter, all you did was put your coat on, and as long as you're going straight from class, from your dorm to class, you was wearing Crocs.
Well, you know what? It definitely worked for you on the court because you played there and, you were one of the top scorers in the entire nation up there in the NJCAA. You scored 30 points, 6 straight games in a row. You averaged that year 28.5 points a game. You shoot more than 50% from the field. You shoot nearly 40% from three. And, how were you able to do it and have that kind of success? I know, obviously, playing in the Bronx in high school, you definitely were a successful player. No question about it. I definitely, knew a little bit about you in high school for sure. But then to go up there and have that kind of success where you're one of the top players in the entire nation, I mean, how were you able to do that?
At the time, you don't notice it. It's going by fast. So it was kind of hard because I started off that season. I didn't play the first 9 games. I had to get cleared from the league to play. So it was kind of hard.
You only played 16 games, if I'm not mistaken, that year, right?
Yeah, it was 18, but I think Clinton Community College games, they took them off the schedule, so you can't see them right now.
It's a common thing that happens in either the USCAA or the NJCAA.
Yeah, so
what happens is teams sometimes don't have enough players, or players can't get cleared to play. Yeah, I know the stories.
Yeah. So I had to get cleared to play. So I didn't play the first 9 games. So I didn't play until the last 3 games of the first semester. So at the time, I didn't really realize it, but my coach told me just be ready because he already told me my expectations at the time. He told me my expectations, and he told me just believe that you're gonna get cleared in time to be noticed by college coaches. So that's what really pushed me to do that. I had to put up big numbers. I'm already starting late. It's people already ahead of me. It's people already got solid numbers midway through the season. You gotta separate yourself by far. By far. You gotta do anything possible to be noticed with. They're not even looking at nobody else at this point. They got to look at you. So
you you put yourself more pressure because you missed the games because you felt you needed to catch up with the other players that were already playing throughout the season in the league, correct?
yes, it was my second year. You got to go to school, and people really look into JUCO players a lot. I didn't really know that.
Really? Oh, listen, for sure. I know a lot of coaches out there, and people used to think years ago, oh, going to a 2-year school, it's almost like, what are you doing? But no, 2-year is really, you get a lot of players that, obviously we're going to talk about that when we come back to York, but you can get a lot of players that have a lot of experience that actually you get useful minutes out there. Coaches would tell me all the time, a JUCO player gets a chance to start and play, let's say 24, 25 games and plays 34, 35 minutes. And let's say when you go to that 4-year, whether you go to a CUNY, whether you go to a SUNY or a Skyline conference, and all of a sudden now, you can be an experienced player where you almost jump the line to a freshman or anybody else that's coming in, even on the team still that didn't play as much. So no, it's a totally different dynamic, I think now as a JUCO than it was even, years ago.
Yeah. So it was I put more pressure on myself. That's just what I had to tell myself. I had to really ask myself, what am I gonna do? What can I do for my team that could also get me noticed from 4-year schools? So my team lacked scoring at the time. We didn't really win much anyway, but I gotta give us a fighting chance. So
I wasn't gonna bring up the winning that year. I mean, I was certainly coming back to York. I'll bring up the winning for sure.
Nah, that's something that I take pride in. I don't hide that, and when I'm at SUNY, I don't hide that because that's what made me want to go to York and want to win. That's what made me the player I was at York. Not even scoring wise, but I played hard, just hard.
No, I watched you play. No, listen, I watched you play at York. York teams were very tough to play. York teams, even when the team lost during the COVID year, you had players that were starting to kind of fall into place. Obviously, Nolan was there. He laid the foundations for when you were there. Jamel's there. He was the interim. Then he became the head coach. And, the players that were on York, they were building. So I think when you went there, it was kind of at the right time. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you win or lose for what you did at Adirondack and to be able to score the basketball the way you did. I mean, I don't care who you are. I mean, there's very few people I know that could put a ball in the hole as many points the way you did. I mean, that still takes a lot. And I mean, I don't care if you're 3-22 or 23-2. I mean, I've covered Ryan Terrell at Yeshiva, who's in the G League right now. I mean, he still has to put the ball in the basket. You still got to do it. Doesn't matter where you are and who you are, and you still did it at a very high level. And I think that takes a lot of intensity and a lot of practice. I mean, did you know when you were going through that run of 30 points, 6 straight games, and you were averaging 30 a game, you scored 38, 32, 30. I mean, you were going, the numbers are just, it's like a video game. Did you? It was. No, listen, it was. I mean, I've covered guys, I mean, in the CUNY. I mean, I've seen the players, and even in the CUNY, it's almost impossible to do that. But, I mean, did you know that, hey, I'm scoring 30 a game, I got to go out and try 30 again? I mean, like, did you know that you were on this streak of 30-plus points?
Yeah, I know I was on the streak only because they will put it in the news article after. So when I read it, it's like you don't know at the time. Then when you read the article, they're like, this is his 4th straight 30-point game. It's like, oh, all right, let me go try to get 5. So like, all right, but if you look at my stats, you'll see I'll still get 8 assists and 4 steals. I still get 12 rebounds. I try to do a little bit of everything. So I don't go out there just aiming for the 30, but I did know I was on the streak and I did want to keep it up.
For sure, and you definitely did that. And did you also know that you were right up there in the nation in NJCAA score? Because I've had guys come on, or even girls come on, and like some would tell me, nah, I don't follow the stats. Nah, I don't watch it. Then there's others that tell me, nope, I know where I am, how much I need. I mean, did you know your place in the nation at that time?
Yes, I did actually, because since you got to play a certain amount of games to even be
To
considered
qualify, yeah.
qualified.
That I knew.
So at first, my first few games, like I'm gonna say 12, 13 games, I was never on the list, even though my numbers was high. And I woke up one day and my coach sent me the screenshot, and he was like, hey, "You number 1 in the region. You number 2 in the country right now." And I was like, "Oh, word." So I just was looking at every day. I just was on the stats, like I'm seeing how I compare to everybody else in the country. It wasn't just more so personally. It was more where I stand amongst everybody else in the country, top scorers. What are they doing? I started looking at the number 1 person was Tilquan Rucker. That's my boy from Bronx Community College. So
Yeah, I know Bronx Community
yeah,
College.
he was number
Absolutely.
1 and I was number 2. I was even looking at their schedules and seeing how they doing. Like, it just made me interested in seeing other people, looking at how other people are scoring efficiently, like I am. How are they doing it? I'm doing it my way. They may be doing it their way. What's their way of doing it? I was just interested in seeing it. So yeah, I knew I was there. I
You
paid
know,
for
I'm curious about this, and tell me your thoughts, because I've covered some really good college teams. I covered a team which we'll get to probably a school in about 20 or so minutes. The Five Towns Sound College men's soccer team, which I had on the 2020 John Jay College, the men's basketball team there, and I had on the Bloodhounds, a lot of the players there, the coaches. When they were winning.
it.
And it's a big deal. People know, hey, you're number 1. They know you're the big man or the big team on campus. Did people in the school know the ramifications of what you would do? I'm just curious because I've interviewed, like I said, a lot of college players and teams. I know you're laughing, so tell me because I love to know.
Yeah. So SUNY Adirondack was a small school, so everybody knew everything, and they wasn't heavy on the sports culture, but mostly students who went there and staff
No.
who went there were sports, were into sports. So majority of the students played the sport. Majority of the staff coached the sport and knew about sports, helped with sports. So it was a very small school. So yeah, going around, even talking to my advisor. Wow, big numbers last night. It's like yeah.
I knew it. I knew it. I was so wondering because again, some players I've had on in the past, are humble about it. Well, I go out there. Then I've had some other players, and oh no, I know it. And people come up to me in class, and they're talking to me about the games. There was interest. There was a high demand to want to go to these games all of a
Yeah,
sudden. So I'm so curious. But they had on the guys who played for the Brooklyn College men's basketball team that went to the Final Four 40 plus years ago. And I'm friends with a bunch of the guys from the team because I have a family friend that I've known since I'm a little kid and played on the team. And, and they would talk about, oh, everybody knew us on campus. They knew. And I was so curious because what you're doing scoring no, because you're scoring 30 points a game. If you're scoring like 13 a game, which is, again, phenomenal stuff. But to score 30 a game, very few people, like you said, D1, D2, D3, NJCAA, USCAA, HBIAC, it doesn't matter. There's very few people that do those things. So I was curious about that. And I almost have to bring this up and I'll swing back to a few other things on Adirondack before we move on to really what I know you most from, which is your college and the Cardinals men's basketball team. COVID happens, and obviously it's right toward the end of the season pretty much. And, did you feel like, what did you feel when COVID happened? I mean, you were one of the players obviously hurt by that. You were obviously going to have to go to another school anyway, but did that impact you at all and how you trained or prepared to where you were going to go for your next school?
yes. So when COVID happened, my season gladly was already over.
Yeah, I figured it just ended. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got invited to a Division 2 showcase. It was in New Jersey where only Division 2 schools were going to be there. I got invited there, so it was supposed to be in I want to say May or April or May of 2020, but
Okay.
we was in shutdown, so I couldn't do it. So I had to settle for another Division 3 school. So I felt like that kind of like it. I want to say it kind of it didn't motivate me. It took motivation away from me because I was like I worked hard to be on the Division 2 radar, and now it's no like the showcase canceled. Nobody could come see me. That I can't go show the coaches. Coaches was sending me letters talking about they're gonna see me at the showcases. If I'm good, they're gonna give me offer. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like this is what I work for. Let's go. I was excited for that showcase. I was in the gym, tireless in the gym, tireless in the gym, waiting for that showcase. And then when they sent us home, when the school sent us home and told us don't go back, it kind of was like, all right, now what I do? Because I couldn't even train.
Yeah, I remember I actually went to it was the John Jay playoff game when they didn't make the NCAA. Brooklyn won the CUNY that year. They beat them in the semifinals, but they got invited, which is almost not even a consolation prize. They got invited to the ECACA, which basically the ECAC game is kind of like the consolation prize. Instead of going to the NCAA, it's a handful of schools. You basically have to pay to play into the game, more or less. But I was at that game. They lost. And then I think the next day, or it might have even been a few days later, was COVID. No, it was actually, I went to John Jay's game, which was on a Wednesday night, if I recall correctly. And then 5 days later, they talked about shutting things down for COVID. Then that was, I think, right in the middle of March. And that was it. So you probably did, if you were doing if you were being scouted at all, you probably were being scouted on Zoom, which was probably like terrible, right? You're doing all the Zoom conference calls, right? That's what your 2020, because I was talking with coaches and players all throughout COVID because there was nobody had anything to do. So now all of a sudden everybody wants to come on my platform. So I'm talking with a lot of these coaches. Everybody's trying to be positive, but unfortunately at this level, the D3 and to a lesser extent the D2 level, nobody went back to normal really until about a year and a half later. And even the 2021 season, there was no what you normally get. Okay, everybody meets back in October. You start a season. Everybody's in the gym. There really was none of that. So it was really you lost 2 years. So
Yeah.
how do you look back on that in your career overall? Do you have a what if? Do you feel like how do you feel? I know you got to play at York. Obviously, you played there. You got the year and a quarter. But do you look at your career as a what if at all because you could have had that D2 showcase?
Yes, of course, because I feel like that was like my prime out of everything every level of my career. I wouldn't say I always had a prime year of every level, but that was probably like a year I took basketball, like that was really my main focus and nothing else. So at that time, I was just like I said, I was just always in the gym. So I feel like, um, what would have it been like? Would
What if, it's a big
what
what
would
if.
it have been like if I was still? What if they didn't shut the gym down? What if I was still able to still compete? What if I was still able to still go to that showcase, still hot off of a hot season, still flaming, still torching?
28 plus points a game, you're NJCAA player of the week, and you're one of the top scorers in the nation, and you lose a year of basketball.
Yeah, oh yeah, I couldn't do anything. So it was like, yeah, what if that didn't happen? What if I was still consistent? What if basketball was still an option during that whole year where we couldn't do anything? Where would I be? What school would I have been to? Would I
You
have
may
went
not even be talking to me right now. No, seriously, you could have had played at another year. You could have maybe went D2. Maybe you would have went to a higher, I don't want to say higher conference, but more of a conference that's more competitive.
yeah,
Maybe you go to the Landmark Conference as an example, which is a more competitive D3 conference. Maybe you go, to a different school, and maybe you don't come back to New York City. You could look at it from those things. But let me ask you, what did it mean to you to be the NJCAA Player of the Week toward the end of that season at Adirondack?
it meant a lot because I felt like I deserved a lot of it. I felt like I deserved more than just that one. I felt like I was the best player in that league for that whole season that I played from when I first stepped on the court to the last game. But I feel like my team success just got in the way of a lot of things
I
that
was going to say, unfortunately, knowing how those things work,
yeah, so
they
I
the
didn't
way
get
they
that. I
vote.
didn't
Yeah,
get all conference, so that at least I walked out with something. So that was something to look on to. So
that's still a big deal. I mean, it's still
yeah,
obviously, it's definitely a big deal, and we're having a big deal right now with a man that has scored 1,000 plus points in his decorated career at three different schools that took him there, but he did it. His name is Mr. Tavon Price, and I had a chance to cover him a little bit when he was with the York Cardinals men's basketball teams, where they had their most success in quite a while, and I am the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice of all sports here. And if you like what you hear from us here on Sportswire Radio, we're on YouTube at Sportswire Radio 6579, Twitch at Sportswire Radio. I'm on Twitter at Thomas Price 2017, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We have an internet radio station at Sportswire Radio. We have a podcast if you'd like to hear some live music, whatever you like. Let me know, and I'll give you your chance to get your opportunity to be heard loud and clear. And I'll have more basketball coverage coming up 3 weeks from today, because to go into our Hall of Fame, our Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, I got something to present to you, so hang on for this. At 8:30 p.m. on May the 19th, Mr. Money himself, Matt Hurt, of course, who played for the St. Joseph's Long Island Golden Eagles men's basketball team. They're SJC New York now, but Mr. Hurt is going to be back to put a cap on his career, which ended also last year, just like Mr. Price's. And Mr. Hurt is going to talk about some of the teams he played on, some of the great moments. We're going to go back down memory lane and some here. So that'll be on May the 19th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on all Sportswire Radio platforms. Of course, Matt Hurt has been a good friend of mine for a very long time, and I enjoyed watching those Golden Eagles teams that he played on, kind of similar to the York teams, where they finally started to have some success after some losing, and they got a chance to taste some postseason basketball, had that famous win over nationally ranked Yeshiva, beat teams like the John Jay College Bloodhounds. Not going to bring up the games they played against York, but I am going to bring up the fact that the games that Matt played in the Skyline Conference, obviously the guys had their best season in the Skyline Conference in nearly a decade. We're going to talk about all of that here. So it'll be May 19th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. But right now, we are here live with the legendary Tavon Price himself, who scored 1,000 points. And get this, 71 games. Not too bad, right? I mean, if I scored 2 points, you'd be like, wow, you scored 2 points. And it was funny because I introduced you in my video yesterday on Instagram, and it got hundreds and hundreds of views, which it always seems to be a common theme. And I put the basketball up, and I was like, well, I'm going to give the basketball to you because you could do a lot better with the ball than me. Although I was told I could play a little bit of basketball, but that's why I'm not here. I might have, but you know what? It's not about me. I'm good at this. You're good at the court. So what led you then to go to Morrisville? Because again, it's still on another stop in the journey. So what made you lead from going to Adirondack to go to Morrisville?
yeah. So Mooresville, that kind of came late in the summer of 2021. It was July, and I guess the coach saw my film. He saw my film on the internet, so he texted me. He gave me a call. He told me would I be interested if I didn't choose a college yet. So I was kind of doing nothing. Still, things were
Oh
still
wow.
shut down in 2021 in the
I
summer.
remember it. I was
Yeah,
still. We were like. It
yeah,
was still
so
not very good.
trying to figure it out. So I was still doing nothing. I was totally out of shape going to Mooresville. He hit me up in July to ask me to go. I told him I'd look into it. He gave me a call. We FaceTimed. He showed me the facility. I couldn't visit because of the COVID rules and things, but he showed me the facility on FaceTime call. And it sounded good. I wanted to go. I was very interested in going to Mooresville, so I hit up one of my trainers, see if he had a gym that I was able to go to, and we got rocking before I could step foot in Mooresville.
Talk to me about this because you had a year and a half. Obviously, we're talking about March, right, 2020 to July 2021. Right? So we're talking a year and a half. Now, I'm sure you're playing pickup somewhere. You're obviously still, doing what you can to stay in shape, but nothing can replicate being in game shape. It's very similar to going back to the wrestling where I interview a lot of wrestlers and overseas, a lot of wrestlers that I had interviewed during that whole time could not go to a gym. They couldn't wrestle. They were maybe trying to stay in shape, but you can't go out and fake that first bump, that first, somebody hits you in the mouth. You haven't been hit, right? So, walk me through that year and a half and how you do find a way to get yourself back into shape. And that's a hard adjustment to go basically a year and a half and then all of a sudden, okay, I got to go back on the court and find a way here. So how did you pull that off?
Um, I didn't really pull it off until I got to Mooresville. Seriously,
Oh wow.
yeah. So he was heavy on the conditioning. Coach Smith from Mooresville was heavy on the conditioning. We ran hills. We got up at 6:30 a.m. in the morning every times.
I like you already.
For speed and agility, we woke up 6:30 in the morning, straight to hills. We did weights also, and we did like yoga things, bicycling in the weight room too. So that was it was. I want to say the process was hard because I took so long off of doing all of those things, but it was kind of quick. It was easy because doing those things every day, it was easy to get back in shape. So by the time first official practice started, out off for preseason, I was good to go.
All right, so obviously you're able to make the adjustment. You still overcome because eventually it comes to a point. I mean, you're a young guy. It's not like you're obviously 50 years old, and it's like
Yeah.
okay, well now it's gonna take me ages. Basically, you get out there. It's like riding a bike. My dad used to always say everything was like riding a bike. So okay, so you get on the court and you start to play for Morrisville, and you start to have some success on the court again, and you're a part of this team. So I guess I have to ask you the question: what led you to make the decision? You know what? I'm going to make the jump back home, technically, sort of in the city of New York to finish your career because, you're playing there. You lead the team in points a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, in games, and you look like you're going to be the focal point of that offense, despite not being in game shape, not playing for as long as you did. And then, what leads you to make the decision to kind of transfer and go to York?
I just wanted to just be closer to home. That's all it really was. I just really wanted to be closer to home. At the time, Morrisville, we wasn't really. I did too much losing. I did too much losing at my junior college, and at the time in Morrisville, I already missed home. So, and we was losing on top of that. So it was like I'd rather just do my 2 years home. I've been away to school too many times. Mooresville's, which is very successful right now, they just had a good season. But at
I
the
saw that. It's an ironic, if I'm not mistaken, Adirondack and Morrisville is
And
tied.
both of them, yeah, both of them they had great seasons. So, but at the time, yeah, I just came from a losing program. We're losing right now, and I'm home. Not saying that it's nobody's fault, but I just wanted to be back home. So that's what really made me start looking to community schools.
No, you know what? And it's a very valid point. I again, I have to go back to wrestling so much because I
Yeah,
have so many wrestlers on here, and sometimes guys tell me, they go pro or they go independent, and then they decide they want to go back into, let's say, what we call the backyard, for example, because they feel like they're more comfortable, they're more at ease, they know the surroundings, and I think that's also a part of it, maybe in the decision where you go and come back home locally and go to York because you've been far away from home. Even though sure you made us laugh and yeah, I got used to the Crocs and I got used to the life up there, the simple life, suburban. America up there, all these people that, didn't look like you, but you become used to the surroundings. But you know what? It still can never beat being home. It still can never beat that feeling of being in the community or around the community that you grew up, no matter what the situation is. I'm always a believer in this in life. I've been successful outside of doing this, and I've always been about community. And I think that for you, ultimately, that was probably a part of the decision, but also a man that I think that also played a role into you coming to York, and a man that knows a lot about basketball at the NJCA level, and a man also that was a pretty good basketball player in his own right, a man I watched play a little bit, a man I've covered. Probably know I'm talking about Mr. Thomas Guerin. Thomas Guerin, also a 1,000 point scorer, I'm pretty sure, at Brooklyn College. He was a guy that played on some really good teams over there, and he was also kind of the protege of the then York Cardinals coach, Nolan Adams. Obviously, Nolan was not there when you were there. It was Mr. Gist as the interim coach, which led him to becoming the head coach. But talk to me about the importance of Thomas Guerin. That's right, Mr. Thomas Guerin, Mr. Jamel Gist's right-hand man, one of his best friends around, and how he was kind of the person that made you decide, you know what? I am going to come home, and I'm going to go play for the York Cardinals men's basketball team.
So yeah, it's funny because I actually didn't know he was really the coach. He was on the coaching staff there. So Coach Nolan Adams was going through what he was going through with his
Yeah.
family.
Yep.
So hoping they're all right. He was going through what he was going through. So when he recruited me, he was more so pointing me in the direction of Coach Guerin and Coach Gist, because he had to handle what he had to handle. So those are more the people who I was talking to during my process. Coach Guerin, when he gave me Coach Guerin's number, I went to go text him, and we had text message history. So it was kind of funny to me, yeah, from back in 2017 or something like that, 2018. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I texted him. I was like, Coach Guerin, yeah, Coach Adams gave me a number. I see we got text message history. He was like, yeah, I know you, I know you, I know who you are. I tried to get you to come to BMCC. Yeah, so I was like, oh, word. So I was like, yeah, that's crazy. Yo, it's crazy how life comes just in a full circle like that. So we was just talking, and Coach Guerin was more of he's gonna break the game down and tell you where he see you at on the court, on the team, where you fit at, what you could do best to help the team. So that's how he really won me over. Like, we was texting, even when I came for practice, he'll pull me over. He'll be like, yeah, you'll be in this slot right here. You were successful here in this slot, and this, I watched your film and things like that. So Coach Guerin really broke the game down and really helped me see where I would be on the team, how I could help the team. And that's really made it easier for me to go there expecting, okay, I know they could use this to help them. They could use that. So that's what Coach Guerin really was good at.
Let me ask you this question. Tell me your thoughts on this, because I interview again a lot of players, and I've gotten to know a lot of coaches at this level. And Thomas Guerin was obviously an accomplished basketball player. Played at Brooklyn College. He obviously knows his way around. He's a respected name. He's obviously somebody. If I speak to Thomas Guerin, I'm going to listen to him very closely, because you had somebody like him that, if you could look him up, the guy was a legitimate player, a very good player. Did that also sweeten the pot to say, you know what, Thomas Guerin, he played this game, played at a high level, played very well, and he knows kind of the D3 scene. He's been in the CUNY, and if he's kind of telling me, you know what, this is kind of where I'm situated, this is where I'm going to be slotted, and I can come to a team and really help them out. Did it help you that you had a guy like Tommy Guerin that played the game and he knows what he's talking about? And it was a big part. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, when you have a 1,000-point scorer as a coach, not one but two, it's kind of easy. So you know what you're talking about. You did something right. You did a lot of things right. So it was easy to listen to him talk to me, and it was everything he said always made sense. He's always gonna tell you what, if he tell you to do something, he's gonna tell you what will happen if you don't do it, and he's gonna show you what will happen if you.
He scored 1,000 points, right? So like if I say it versus him, I'm listening to Thomas Guerin 100 out of 100 times, because he's played the game, he's had success. I mean, it's very easy. Yeah, so
that was easy.
But that had to help, and that's also, and I've said this to Jamel. I don't remember if you listened to the interview when I had Jamel in a couple years ago, but I always felt that what Jamel Tommy Garrett, and then later the following year, Justin Gist were good at is that they were successful players that were still close to your age range. I feel like, and I've said this over the years, you tell me what your thoughts are on this, that you listen more to people that A, play the game, but B, are also, they're almost like a peer to you, where it's like, if somebody spoke and they were, let's say, 20, 30 years older than you at this level. Yeah, okay, they had success, but they're not really close enough to like being a peer. Whereas Jamel, Justin, and Tommy Guerin, they were all basically peers. Jamel was basically out of school when you started, only a couple years. Tommy Guerin's out of it, what? When you started college, I don't know, 8 years, 7, 8, 9 years. Still relatively, these guys are like, they're peers. I mean, does that, you think, helped in the fact, in addition to them being very successful players, but also they were peers of yours? So if they say something, it's very relatable.
Yeah, it was very relatable because like the basketball world is changing. So
For
the
sure.
basketball,
100%.
it's easier because they're closer. Like Coach Gist, for example, he's about 6 years older than me.
Yep.
So he's come on, you're right there. Basketball is changing. We both you in the same era. When you stop playing, I'm still playing. So and I'm still when you leave college, I'm entering the college level. So you're seeing
Exactly. He ended in 2016. So
yeah.
automatically
So and that's
there's
when I
no age
started.
range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So listen, we was in high school probably sometimes at the same time in one place.
Exactly.
So at every level, I feel like they was able to see the same change that I see, maybe even before I seen it because they're a little couple years older than me. So of course, it was easy to listen to those guys.
Yeah, see, I feel it's so important in basketball that you have that because again, I do a lot of wrestling these days, and wrestlers could be 20 years older than somebody, and you still have, like, it still makes sense. But in basketball at this level, I really think it's important that you have people that are closer as peers. So I definitely agree with that. Okay, so you make the move, you come to York. Tommy Guerin plays a huge role into that. And you come to this team that also adds a player, Mambe Caresse, right around the same time you come in. And
Yeah,
it's kind of so fascinating because Mambe, who I talked a lot about with Jamel when he came on after that 22 season, it's you and Mambe that get added to this team. And it's a team that struggled that first half of the season, but you ended the season very strong. If I recall correctly, you won either 4 or 5 of the last games of the regular season, won the playoff game going into the semifinal game. So, what from your vantage point? Now, Divine came on here. We talked a lot about that from his vantage point. Jamel was here after that season. What made that team kind of gel and come on strong right at the perfect time almost? What made that team gel as good as you guys did?
I want to say two things. One was Mambe Caresse.
Oh, I
When
think he
I
was
got there,
I think Jamel said he was the difference factor.
yeah, when I got there, his energy was just listen. We turning this around right now, and I'm here. I got there like I don't know what we turning around. I wasn't here for it, but listen, I'm here with y'all. I mean, I'm here with y'all. We gonna go through the fire together. But yeah, Mambe was just that energy in practice every day, at every game, before every game, during the game. Whatever we going through, we gonna turn it around right now. So that was the energy when I got there. And two, we just wanted to get it done for Coach Adams. He wasn't with us for that run, and we just wanted to make him proud.
And he had such a relationship with Tommy Guerin and Jamel. Obviously, especially their relationship goes back. And Nolan, obviously, we all had wished it would have been different there. But, you know, you talked about the fact that, and we spoke of this earlier in the show, that the team as a whole over the years struggled. And now you guys are starting to win. Did you guys feel also that you were playing with a heavier burden than other schools in that conference because York had been down for a while? I mean, did you guys like feel that at all? I'm just curious on that and from your vantage point.
Yes. Every game, Coach Gist would tell us like they don't want us here. They don't want us here. They don't want us to be here. And sometimes at first you think of it as motivation, even though it was motivation, but after a while it's like, all right, they really don't want us here. And we start to think about the history from York, which I didn't know until I got there. They had ineligible player before and stuff
Yep.
like that.
It
So
was
we
an issue with a season and the season had to be
yeah,
voided. It was a
yeah.
lot of stuff that went
So
on.
we
Yep.
had bad history, and I didn't know that going into York. So now I'm starting to understand why he's saying that. They don't want us here. They don't want us here. We're
And he
friendly.
knew it firsthand because he played at Brooklyn, so he knows the whole. Jamel knew the whole thing.
Exactly. So it was just like, all right, we're winning games now, and they don't want us here. So don't think that y'all gonna even get a foul call when y'all go to the paint. Just we gotta play and we gotta take the ball, to take the game outside of the ref hands. We gotta just be hard, like just play harder than everybody else. They don't want us here, so we gotta keep the same energy. Have them let them keep not wanting us here, so we could keep being here.
And you guys definitely did that. And you guys had some really good players. And I think that what happened was the recruiting started to pay off. Obviously, Divine, I'm going to talk about Divine in a few minutes. You have Karan Dublin. I mean, he speaks for itself. And, had you played with players like the players you had at York? Because you played with some really good players. Donald Hartley Jr., Matthew Trepetta was there. Killer was there the next season. But all those players, Mambe, you talked about his energy. I mean, there was some really good players there. I mean, that York team, I mean, like, listen, they were no joke. I mean, listen, I watched them even in the 2020 and the 19 season, but did you feel like also that you were playing with maybe some of the best players you played with at that time when you went there? What did you think about that?
Yes. I didn't really play with top caliber players throughout my college career. I played with very few. So going there was like, oh, all right. Sometimes I got caught. Sometimes I got caught watching the game. I'm in the game, and it's like, all right, I don't have the ball in my hands all the time like I was at my other school. So it's players that can actually do something. And sometimes I'll miss a rebound, and coach gets to play, yo, go rebound. I'm like, oh, Tavon shooting the jump shot is going in. It feel good to play on a team where everybody can really play basketball and it can improvise. So that's what I missed at my JUCO level that I enjoyed at York. And yeah, so I just got caught watching some games because it was it felt good actually not to have to always be at 100 every single time, and you have help.
Oh, you guys definitely did that. And I think also it probably motivated you in practices because, maybe you're not the number one option, but you know what? You're playing with guys are grinding, guys are here and they want to win. You went to Adirondack and, the record was what it was. You were in an environment, suburban, middle of nowhere, you know, you're the big man, you're a big fish in a small pond. But in York, these players are fighting for something. They're only fighting kind of for their rights to be on the court, but they're fighting for a coach that's not there.
Mhm.
And it's a program that's had a lot of issues, a lot of scandals in the past, and they're trying to rise from the dead. And did you feel like even practices were like all competitive and such?
Yeah, practices were very intense when I got there, especially because when I got there, the position the team was in the middle of the pack.
I remember that. Yep.
So we wanted to either stay there or move up a couple of seeds, which we did. I think we were when I got
Number
there, we
four.
were like in the seventh seed.
Yeah, I think you guys, if I recall correctly, were out of the playoffs, but then what wound up happening was you got to fourth, right? You were number
Yeah, we
four.
got to I think we got to third.
Yeah, third, the
I
third or
think we got to
fourth.
third. We got to
Yeah,
third. We went
I
on
think it was fourth. The next year was
next
fourth.
year fourth. Yeah.
The first year you were there was number three because you had your home playoff games both times, but it was the 4-5 matchup in 22-23. You were number three because Baruch was the 2 seed that year. You're
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went the third seed. So practice was very intense because we had to make a push. We wanted our main thing was our first game has to be a home playoff game. That was our main thing. So we went on a 9-game win streak. So I guess practices, and we didn't really practice that much. So practice had to be very, very intense because when I got there, we had to play a game every other day, or some games was today.
Yeah, because if I recall correctly, because of what happened with COVID and there was scheduling issues. Probably I think before you were there was scheduling issues, so there was a
Yeah,
lot of makeup dates. So yeah, it
yeah,
was
yeah.
like
The
it was
makeup
weird.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I got there, the very few practices we had, I probably practiced. I want to say my first year, we probably had a total of I want to say 8 practices because we had to play more games. If you look at the schedule that year, every game was stacked up on top of each
I
other.
know, because I remember it. Because, like I said, I remember covering it, and we spoke about with Jamel, and I had Ryan Highland come on. I think either right before you guys played hit them, or it's
Mhm.
right after. And the schedule was like usually you get like 4 days between. It
Yeah,
was like one day, one day. It was only like one day off, one day off, one day off. That like last month and a half of the season, there was no layoffs. It was almost like you guys were back to back, back to back, back to back, which is very rare in
yeah,
college basketball. You guys played a lot of games in a short amount of time, if I
yeah.
recall.
That took a toll on the body too, a real toll
Especially
on
for
the
you,
body.
but especially for you, right? Because you had went a year and a half without playing. You went from having a transfer, and now all of a sudden you're going to a team that has to now play all these makeup games, and you guys really all of a sudden have to make up ground because when you came there, you guys were struggling. You guys got off to a slow start, and then all of a sudden you got to play all these games. So for you, it had to be extra difficult.
Yeah, it was very difficult because in Mooresville I played the first 6 games.
I remember
So
that. Yep.
when I played the first 6, it was still about 7 more games to go during that semester, and I was already sitting down doing nothing, just doing schoolwork while the team was going. I stopped playing because I didn't want to keep playing, and I knew I didn't want to be with the team for the following semester. So I just stopped playing, and I already wasn't doing nothing. And then um the season the games kept getting postponed when I actually
Yep.
enrolled into York. So I did the
I remember
second
because it
half
was
of the
like
semester didn't start
COVID
until
and
February. Yeah.
teams
So
didn't have players sometimes, and it
yeah,
was,
so
it's
my
a
first
nightmare.
practice was in February, and that was real tough. So it took a toll on me straight into games. I want to say I played my first game 2 days after my first practice.
Yeah, because if I want to say correct, if I'm wrong, if I recall, the second semester started the end of January, which would have led you guys to return from break, and there were games postponed even from that point, and that whole month of February, which normally you only play maybe 6 games in the regular season. You wound up playing like, I don't know, like 9 or something like that. Some like whatever big, if I recall, I'm so off the top of my head. And that's a lot of pressure, but you guys got red hot. I mean, you had the best season the school has in years. You win your first playoff game and you really do a number on teams. I mentioned John Jay. You go into John Jay and win a game late in the year. You beat Brooklyn and Brooklyn. Coach Gist, I know he was very happy about that game. You did that to go into West Quad there. CCNY, not always a tough environment. Hunter, I mean, those Hunter teams when Pellin was the coach, now Jamel's the coach now. I mean, those games are like 3-hour marathons. I've been there in the Sportsplex. I mean, those games are really long. And, like, was it special knowing what you guys were able to do and winning as much as you did? I think you won like 9 of the last 10 games going into the Baruch game. You guys were just on fire. I mean, and
Yeah.
I said this when Jamel came on. You guys peaked. I don't know if it was too little, too late, but you guys really were the best team in the second half of that conference that year, if I recall.
Yeah. Like if I would have knew if I would have knew that I would have wanted to stay home in the summer, I would have just tried to get straight into York instead of going to
Well, if you would have been there the full year, I think we're talking about them at the number 2 seed. They get the home playoff game you guys get instead of Baruch. And maybe it's a difference. I don't know. Maybe you guys do play in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know.
that's another what if. But at the time, that meant the world to me that we was winning all those games because that was the most games I was winning in my college
Oh, I
career.
don't even know if you won that many games before you
Yeah,
went there.
exactly. So at the time, it was like, all right, I'm rocking with this. This mean everything. Like, let's get this win, another win, another win, another win. That meant everything to me.
When you guys get to the playoffs
Hmm.
and you get there, it's a big accomplishment. And then you win the playoff game. You win that home game there. And you beat CCNY. How big of a deal was that for you, and the rest of your teammates and the school to have accomplished that magnified moment? It was monumental for that program. I mean, how special was that?
For the whole program, it was like, all right, we here. We got a real legit chance. This is the final 4 game. After being CCNY, this is the final 4 game. It's 2 more games. We started this season with 3 wins. Now we got 14 wins. Let's do it. It's 2 more games left. It was just that was just the whole around campus, around the facility, the basketball facility, athletics facility. It was the men's team got a chance to really take the championship. So that was just that's what was going through our heads at the time.
I mean, this was a program a few years prior wins 2 games. This is a program that when people looked at them on the schedule, were like, okay, that's a win. That's a win.
And that's what really motivated us more. And that's what Coach Gist always told us before every game, especially the John Jay games and the Baruch games. They already got us written through. They already
yeah, absolutely. I can tell you, I was there. I watched you guys play, not in 22 because it was COVID, but I watched the games in 2019 and 2020. And York was considered to be like, that was a win for John Jay. That was a win for Baruch because I covered the John Jay team in 1920 that won 20 games. That had Doug Levy, who played pro briefly, Jason Brower, who's still playing in Puerto Rico. So, I mean, I watched those players. Garrison Watkins just finished his career with 1,000 points. So, I mean, like John Jay and Baruch were the class of the CUNY. Yeah. And now you guys were going into John Jay and beating them in the doghouse. You guys were going into Brooklyn, who won the CUNY in 2020, went to West Quad and beat them. You guys went to CCNY and beat them. You guys went to Lehman and beat them. I mean, you guys won games that, you guys hadn't done in years. I mean, we're talking, I think if I recall correctly, like 8 years, you guys hadn't any real success in 8 years. That's a monumental thing that you guys did. I mean, you guys had more of a cross to bear than any of those teams in that conference.
Yeah, and that's why we just wore it as a weight on our shoulders. We just play with that. We put our heart into that because that's what our coaches told us every single time. Before this year, we was the laughing stock. Before this semester, I got there with second semester. He was saying before this semester, we was laughing stocks. We got good players on the team, but our records in the past don't show how good we really are. But now they see we got our full complete team, and he was just telling us don't take your foot off nobody's neck because they going into this game they was thinking they gonna pad their stats on y'all, but now they leaving with an L. So that's what Coach Gist and the rest of the coaching staff just had us keep in mind.
So walk me through then the semifinal game in Manhattan against Baruch. Now, you guys in the first half played very well. It was a neck and neck game. Second half, they pull away. Walk me through your memories of that game. I've spoke with Jamel about it. He's had a few things to say. I had Tavon on. I'll get to him. But what are your memories of that game in the semifinals?
I try to forget as much as possible.
I think Jamel said at the time he didn't even watch it. I mean, he probably still hasn't watched it.
I didn't watch the game. That game makes me the most angriest game because that was the closest I ever got to a championship game, to be on the championship team. I feel like if it was any year to win, it was that year. But the moments of that game was in the first half, it was like, oh.
Yeah, you guys got to a great start. I mean, honestly, if I remember watching the game, and I'm like, wow, you know what? These guys, because I was getting ready to have Jamel on. And it was like, okay,
so
these guys
that
might
year,
pull it off.
Yeah, that year it was like, all right, the first time they beat us by 7. The second time we played them in their house, they beat us by 3. We up 15 right now in the first half.
You guys were. You had what a first half it was. It was like I think it was like 35-20 at one point or something.
So I just think that we took our foot off the gas. I think that was just all it was. We got too comfortable with the lead because we never really had that much of a big lead on Baruch in the first place. That both years we had to play from behind to make it a close game. I mean, both games that year we had to play from behind to make it a close game. So we didn't come off strong in neither of the first 2 games. So that game, I feel like we kind of took our foot off the gas because we got comfortable. We never seen ourselves up 15 on Baruch. We thought it was going to be a dogfight from the very beginning.
Now tell me your thoughts. And again, this is a hypothetical. Do you think that if you guys had the game in your building, that it would have been a different outcome?
I feel like it would have because Queens to Manhattan, a lot of people ain't really make that trip.
It's a far commute.
Yeah,
where you guys are, it's you're going all the way on. It's a long trip on the F train. You guys are in Jamaica. To go to Jamaica from Lexington Avenue, that's not an easy commute. I know it. I've done it.
So I feel like we was grateful to have the amount of people we had. We was shocked to see the amount of people we had actually come to that game, but that was because of the year we was having. We was
Oh,
doing
you
so,
guys were
so
like, I
everyone.
remember saying it. I was like, did you guys peak too little, too late because you won all the games, but you didn't get the 2 seed. You had
Yeah,
that 2 seed, you know.
that's what we was really gunning for, but it didn't come out the way it was. But I feel like if it was in our gym in York, I feel like the game would have been completely different because playing in Baruch, if you look at the crowd,
Oh, I know it. I know it.
they have like a quarter, they have like 75% of the bleachers, and
Yeah,
then York got one little strip. So it's like, all right, damn. So
and
it's like
you
the whole gym
and
is a
they and see, and also they've won so much. They have been since CSI has left the CUNY. They have been above and shoulders above the rest of that conference every year. Leslie's teams win
yeah,
every year. Those players, they're used to playing in the big moments, so they're comfortable in the
yeah,
playoffs. They're used to having those home games. You know, teams
yeah,
like you guys haven't been there consistent. I mean, Brooklyn's been there at times, but they've struggled recently. John Jay's only really had 2 seasons of real success, 18, 19, 19, 20. Lehman's okay. Lehman the last 2 years has been really good, but Baruch's every year, unless he's got his teams there. So those players, it's almost like they're used to winning.
yeah. They're always in the moment. They're always in that big stage. So of course they're gonna have the advantage over the rest of the teams because they're at that stage every year.
For sure. And then obviously transferring into your last season there. And before I get to a few other things and obviously finish the interview, because we're here with Mr. Tavon Price. If you want to follow Tavon, I have put his Instagram here link throughout the conversation. So stay tuned with that. But did you know that the team you had in 22-23, you guys got off to a really slow start that year? But conference play, you guys picked it up again in the second half. I mean, did you kind of say, you know what, we're gonna just write the games off in the first half of the year, non-conference, and then just kind of find our footing in conference play? Because if I recall correctly, you guys in conference play were 500. You played better in the second half.
Yeah,
That first half was just, I mean, miserable. But did you guys
yeah.
kind of play? We're just worried about conference play. What
Um,
happened there in that season?
I'm not too sure because that season too, I was there for half the season because I had if I would have played the first year, I wouldn't have been the first semester. I wouldn't have been able
Oh,
to
I
play.
know. Yeah, you're right.
So I came in the second half. So I don't really know what was going through those guys' minds during that time. By the time I came, it was conference play.
Was that something that was talked about when you got back on the court? I mean, obviously the conference play versus non-conference was what it was, but you were coming back again into a situation where, the team struggled, but was that talked about when you got back to the team in January?
Um, Lightly, loosely. All that was said was really just put that non-conference schedule behind you. That schedule is not going to get us to the tournament. Those losses is not going to get us to the tournament. We got to win our conference. Those losses go out the window. If we win our conference, we still go dancing. So it was more so take those losses, take them, use them as motivation, win the conference, go to the tournament.
You had your best game of your career at York against Baruch late in the year. You scored 18 points, which I know was nothing compared to what happened at Adirondack. But you guys always played Baruch tough the 2 years you were there. What made that game as special as it was on an individual level, where you guys were neck and neck there and still showed that you were a team that was very formidable? What do you remember about that day against
Um,
Baruch?
that day was just all I remember going into that game was thinking of the Final Four game the year before, and in the Final Four game, um, the coach was letting me shoot the ball. So I just knew I was gonna have my best game from Baruch shooting the ball. I'm gonna have an open opportunity.
I was gonna say you got a lot. If I recall, I remember watching it. You got a lot of open looks in that
He's
game.
not gonna close out on me. You gotta hit your shots. He's shoot the ball. Don't try to drive all the time. Drive later. Shoot first. So that's just what I told myself, and it worked out for me.
Well, it definitely did. And you guys, again, you got hot enough to get the home playoff game. But what happened there in the playoff games? What happened there? Again, you ran into Hunter. Again, you played them a few days earlier at senior day. But what happened there where you drew them twice and lost both games? What happened there?
Um, in those games, I feel like Hunter just they played their game better than we played our game. I
Well,
want to.
that style of play that Pellin played, oh my
Yeah,
God.
they shot. They had to have at least triple the amount of shot attempts than we had. They had to have at least triple the amount of shot attempts. We didn't. We wasn't even close in shot attempts. And that they Hunter has the type of game when they're hot.
You can't stop them because they play the same style. It's
Yeah,
coaches hate in this conference. Coaches hated that when John Pellin
yeah.
was the coach. They hated it. You have no
So it's
idea.
constant moving, and if they're hitting their shots, the game is gonna drag. It's gonna be a long game.
Oh my God! I've watched the Hunter John Jay game live, and I think I got to the building at 7 o'clock. I did the last 4 minutes, no joke. It took 45 minutes. It literally,
Yeah,
I didn't get out of the sportsplex by 9:30. It was like,
it's
oh my
about
God.
in about 20 seconds. You get two possessions from each team
Yep,
when
that's
you
it.
play against Hunter. So that was the thing. They played their game perfect, perfect. They ain't really miss versus us. They had one kid, I forgot his name. He had about 7 threes on us in that game. So they played their game perfect. We couldn't capitalize on ours.
Yeah, they had a kid. I'm trying to remember his name. It was George? Was it George Keener? I think who had scored. I don't know if he was there that year or the previous year, but he was like he was lights out. Then they had the European player that was like he just nobody could guard him. I mean,
Yeah.
those they was just you couldn't play them. So when you look back, I want to talk about some individual players and then kind of move on to the show. But how do you look back on the 2 years? You do get to the playoffs. Obviously, 22, you had far more success, but you get to the playoffs both years. How do you look at those 2 years at Yorkover? You don't obviously individually have the success, but you still, you were an important player. You probably were more important in the second half of the 2023 season because individually you put up a little better numbers. But how do you look at those 2 years then?
Those 2 years, I just look at it as I'm grateful. I was able to go to a school where I could compete in the conference, where my team was not looked at as a joke anymore.
Oh, the second year you came and you guys weren't a joke. It was, I think the expectations were higher in 2023 than
Yeah,
22 because we didn't know you. I mean, I had Jamel on, we thought players were going to come on, but it was COVID. But in 22, 23, it was like, okay, this team is like ready this team should win now. They should be ready to go on and be a perennial contender. And
yeah, that was the expectation. So I want to say the competition going into every game when I first got to York in 22 was very different from going into every game in 23. In 22, teams kind of they feared us towards the end, towards I want to say the last 3 to 4 games. In 23, teams feared us before the game, so they played their hardest from the very beginning of the game.
yeah, because they knew you. They knew that was a team. You won 9 of the 10 games going into Baruch. They knew that all of a sudden you had a collection of players, and you played with some really good players. I mean, Terrell Fullerton. What was he like, Terrell Fullerton?
Terrell Fullerton, he makes the game easier for you. Terrell Fullerton reminds me, and I tell him this all the time. You was me when I was at SUNY Adirondack. The difference is you got I wish I was in your position, bro.
Well, I wish you had Terrell Fullerton in
Yeah,
Adirondack.
I wish I had you. If I had you, just you from this team in SUNY Adirondack, the season would have been totally different because me and Terrell Fullerton are two of the same type of players.
Yeah, I
We
could see
could
that a little
score
bit.
all 3 levels of the court. We could get to the free throw line and we could pass the ball. So every high IQ players play defense. We play hard. We're very passionate for the game. So I always tell Terrell, y'all, I wish, bro. I was always accepting my role on the York team. So I don't really care about being the leading scorer and all that. But yo, bro, you are the man on a good team, bro.
What was Micaiah Gooseby like?
Makai Guzzi, that's my guy. That's my guy. He was our Mombe that second year.
Yep.
He was
Yep.
our Mombe. He was our energy guy. He's never gonna tell you if you're doing bad. He's never gonna tell you that you're doing bad. Makai is always gonna tell you. He's always gonna pat your chest. Yo, come on, bro. Like we need you. Let's go. Like let's go. Like, you could do it. Let's go. Let's turn it around. He was just like Mombe. Just like Mombe. I want to say Mombe was a little bit more aggressive, and Micaiah was more of the cool approach. Like, let's go, but like he gonna talk to you, yo, bro, you good. Mombe's more aggressive. You gonna turn it around. You gonna turn it around. Micaiah is more on some, yo, bro, you good, bro. Let's go. You going the next play, you gonna get it. So it's more two different, the same
Yeah,
thing.
but it's a what? But there's a what if you had Mambe the next season. There's a big what if, obviously.
If we had Mombe the next season, I don't think a team would grab a rebound. Owale, Keela, Mombe,
Oh my! Well, he just had him.
and
Oh my
Micaiah
goodness!
Gooseby. Those three, if we had Mombe with Micaiah Gooseby and Owale the
I
next
think you
year,
would have played in the NCAA tournament.
we would have been in the NCAA
You
tournament for
would have
sure.
been in the NCAA tournament. That's how
And
good.
just Mombe, his defense, we was able to have Mombe guard the inbounder and
I
try
never
to
saw
attack
anybody
the
when he played for you guys. I never saw anybody in the CUNY like him. That never saw anybody in the CUNY
I
like
never
him.
saw. I don't think I saw a forward in that league that had that much energy.
No, you know what? And I said it to Ryan Highland, who was on the show. I don't think I've seen anybody like him, and I think you guys were missing him. I want to say hello to one of my buddies who is the Triple W World Crown Champion, Mr. Big Bad Silverwolf. How you doing, Mr. Silverwolf? Thank you for tuning in. We've got about 20 or so more minutes with Mr. Tavon Price. Want to be respectful of his time here, and I have to ask you. Certainly, you mentioned Mr. Killer. You talked about Mr. Fullerton, but I have to mention the man that kind of tied us here, Mr. Divine Chisholm. And what was he like as a player? Because I had him on the show, and that's kind of why you're here.
Yeah, Devon was more. Devon is like that's a. I want to call him a brother. That's my brother. Going into York, the first year, me and Devon was more trying to get me more accumulated to the team. Him and
Yeah,
Don more than anybody. Devon was our leader. If all the teams I mostly played for, I was probably mostly the leader on most of my teams. But playing with Devon, that that's a guy you're fine being. You could be the leader of this team because you're doing it the right way. He's
and
always
he was your sportsman guy, which was the first time the program had that in years. I mean,
yeah.
when he was the leader, hands down for your team.
Yeah, Devon is going to stay level-headed at all times, and that's what you want to see out of a leader. You want to see somebody who's not going to panic, who's going to keep playing the game with you, who's going to go through that fire with you. And he's one of the guys that I'll say my fault, and he's going to say it was his fault. He's the captain of the team; it's his fault. So, not saying that that's what you want to hear from somebody, but that shows you a lot about the person you are, person that you friends with. So, me and him grew our relationship a lot over my second year at York.
What is one or two things that stand out most in your career at York?
I want to say my game at Baruch, that 18-point game, and I want to say my John Jay game, my first year, this game at John Jay.
I was gonna say that I remember that game because it was a game for seeding.
Yes, that game was important for seeding, and we was in Devon was in foul trouble that day, so I had to play a lot of minutes, and I came up big for the
And that
team.
was their if I recall, that was their senior day.
Yes,
That was their
that was
senior
the
day.
senior day. And I came up big down the stretch of that game. So I want to say those two games are my two highlights of my time at York.
What was it like playing for Jamel Gist?
Playing for him, I want to say that was a blessing. I want to say that was a blessing because it's not just basketball with Coach Gist. It's more than that.
He's a good man. He's a good
Yeah,
man.
he
He's
helped me get a
legitimately a good
job.
man.
He knew me for 3 months, and he helped me get a job in the summertime while we come back and work.
He's a park supervisor. He's in the
Yeah,
parks department. He's a
yeah.
good man.
So it was easy. When you have a guy that care about you and that much, and I had lost my uncle at the time too at my
I'm
first year
sorry.
at York, so it's all right. So he was always reaching out, yo, you good? You all right? You cool? You need anything? Always know you could talk to me. And I was like, I want to say the first time I really had a coach that really meant that.
He's a good man. I want to say this. I don't even know if he'll hear it, but he was one of my favorites that's ever come on the platform.
Yeah.
I have to ask you then about Justin Gist.
Justin Gist is, I want to say that's his twin. Sir,
That's what I wanted to ask him. Could you tell them apart?
yeah, both. If I'm not mistaken, both 1,000-point scorers.
Yes, they are.
So,
Yes. Yeah. One of them was at SJ Brooklyn,
yeah,
and obviously Jamel was at Brooklyn.
yeah. So, yeah, twins, basically the same type of guys. They always are thinking the same thing, and they listen to each other. It's weird. Brothers, I have a brother, and we clash, But for them people,
My brothers and I are certainly different. Everybody would say, "Well, there's nobody like me." But yeah, the Gist family in basketball is royalty.
yeah, they're
They're,
gifted. They're gifted.
they're royalty. I mean, the brothers, the sisters. I mean, they have offspring everywhere. They're like kind of like for our wrestling fans, they're like the what used to be the McMahon family. They're just like they have like generations of them. They're really that's how good they are. But
Yeah.
okay. Well, all right. Well, you know what? I want to ask you about one player before I move on to final thoughts and give you
Mhm.
something because I have something to present to you.
All right.
What a small world basketball is because I noticed that you know somebody that I know very well. You know somebody that I've had on my platform many times, and I actually consider a very good friend. He's a great speaker. Because kind of like your person, he might be a little bit more charismatic in a lot of ways because he certainly can talk because he has a broadcast background, kind of. And I'm talking about a guy that's actually still playing in the game of basketball, Mr. Damani Merritt. So tell me about Damani Merritt and how do you know him?
I know Damani Merritt because actually before I went to SUNY Adirondack, I was a student at the College of New Rochelle, which is now
Yes.
closed down. So
Yes.
yes, my first day on campus, first open run, Damani was actually on my team, and we was playing against like I guess the other five players were knew each other going into the school, so they had very high chemistry. So they was winning all the games, and me and Damani was just on the same team that day, and we almost beat them. So we just was like, oh, we gonna be on the same team for the rest of the day. We only gonna give each other the ball because me and him was the one putting in most of the work. So that became my boy. We close. We still talk to
He's
today.
the all-time leading scorer at Five Towns.
Five pounds. Yeah, he did his thing. I'm very proud for him. But that's how I met him. I was a student at New Rochelle before I actually transferred to Adirondack and played.
Wow. Okay. So you know what? I owe Damani an appearance, and I have to ask you. Speaking of Adirondack, Victor Rocca, Darren Bigelow.
Yes, yes. Victor Roca, one of the best shooters I've ever 3-point shooters I've ever played with. And Darian Bigelow, one of the best rebounders I've ever played with. I wish
Wow.
I could have played with them at other schools.
I wish you would have had them at York because I feel like at York you guys were like right there. I really feel like before I present to you something that 2022 team were this close. You
Hmm.
guys were this close, and you guys gelled kind of at the right time. But if it was a couple of games earlier, I think we might have been talking about you playing in the NCAA tournament and not having to play on the road at Baruch.
Yeah.
And I think that's just to me such a what if there. But I want to present to you something. I have something special before I get to closing thoughts and ask you one more question. I like to do this for everybody that comes on here. I want to give you something. I don't want you to just come on to Sportswire. It's a one-off appearance. I want to obviously do something special, and I want to do something I guarantee you never got at York. I guarantee you never got this anywhere in the game of basketball, in the game of life. So I'm going to do this here because for those that are listening and watching on Sports by Radio, where all sports matters, I want to make this day special for you because on April 28th, 2024, on all of my platforms, I want to make sure you have the certificate when we're off the air. It is Tavon Price Day. So whether it's on YouTube at Sportswire Radio 6579, Twitch at Sportswire Radio, Twitter at Thomas Price 2017, Instagram at the Sports Report 2021, my personal Facebook page at Tom Bryce, Facebook at Sportswire Radio, sportswireradio.org, even my Tumblr and LinkedIn. It is your day. So congratulations. I wish that they'd hang up a banner of yours in York. Maybe they'll put you in the Hall of Fame. I'll get to that in a minute, but I
So
wanted you to have something very special. So congratulations, my friend.
thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. I
You
appreciate
deserve it. You definitely deserve it. And I do want to ask you then. So, what is the future for you in basketball? I mean, are you still involved? What would you like to do? What's the kind of future for Tavon Price in basketball?
Right now, I coach two age groups. I coach a middle school team. I'm an assistant coach at a middle school team, and
Okay.
I'm also an assistant coach at a high school JV program. So I'm
Okay.
still heavy around the pro. I'm still heavy around the game, and I just play in some leagues in the summer. Around.
Do you wanna be involved in college again as a coach in some form? Do you
Yes,
wanna go back?
that's the level I want to get to. I want to be a college coach at any level. I want to be a successful college coach. So I'm even on Instagram stealing plays that I see from these Division 1 schools and stuff, writing them in my book. So hopefully I get there one day. That's my
Well,
plan.
you know what? I shouldn't do this, but you know what? I really don't mind doing this. If I know anybody, and I do know a couple schools, and they're looking for an assistant coach, I'll certainly let them know because your background, your resume, 1,000 plus points, played in the postseason, were a guy that was able to adjust his game to help his teammates, was a guy that went out there and, has shown and conducted himself in a way of professionalism. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, if I can anyway, I would certainly like to help you, and I think that I would certainly hope to be able to do that. So yeah, definitely. If there's a will and a way, I would certainly like to do that, and I think that the players that you are helping now are going to certainly benefit from you, just like it was on the court when you were at York and Adirondack, and led you to all those different accomplishments. And I guess I should ask you then two more questions, two more. My
Yeah.
first question is, what do you want to say to anybody that has supported you on your journey, which has led you to 1,000 points, led you to obviously being a significant player at York, still being involved in the game in some way? What do you want to say to the people that have supported you throughout this time?
I just want to say thank you to all the people that supported me throughout my college career. Without them, I wouldn't be a 1,000 point scorer. Without all of them listening to all the problems I had, all the venting, my blood, my sweat, and my tears, whoever been in the gym getting my rebound with me. I just want to say if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be as a decorated athlete as I was.
Well, that's why obviously basketball is a game that we love so much. It brings so many people together, and obviously the people that were behind you definitely did that. And, before I obviously get to closing thoughts, I did want to ask you one more question because I did talk about the Hall of Fame. And I do have this thing called the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame where we have a whole bunch of people in there. We have a guy, Danny Burns, who played in the Final Four for Brooklyn College, the only team in the entire CUNY to ever be in the Final Four. I have Jason Facina, the head coach of the Five Town Sound men's soccer team and the United States amputee soccer team in my Hall of Fame, knows Damani Merritt very well. And we have many wrestlers around the world, but, kind of lacking in some basketball players and especially some 1,000 point scorers. And I could use a 1,000 point scorer in the Hall of Fame who actually deserves it. And I was wondering, Tavon Price, maybe you want to come back onto the show in a couple of months or maybe sooner and take your place into this little thing that we have called the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame.
Of course, I'll be honored. Just let me know when to be on here, and I'll be
Well,
here.
I think we could definitely do that in the month of June. I think I'm glad you said yes because some people are like, "Well, let me think about it." Well, there is nothing to think about it.
Nah,
So the
that's
fact
nothing to
that,
think about.
well, I'm happy they did that. So obviously, you know what? There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. After Mr. Hurt takes his place in the Hall of Fame, I'm going to make sure that Mr. Tavon Price gets his chance in the history and recognizing his work because I do think at this level, before I get to closing thoughts, I do think that D3 players need to be recognized far more because I think sometimes I think whether it's CUNY, Skyline, even the Landmark Conference, other conferences around the SUNYAC, that we need to do more to honor players like yourself, players like your teammates, people like Coach Gist, people like Coach Guerin, because what you guys did to sacrifice, you guys were not obviously being paid. There was no scholarships. You guys went out there, had to go out and work, had to go and still hit the books and still be able to make that dedication to be as successful players that you were. That's why I want to be able to go out there and recognize you guys for all the great things that you do. And we're starting that obviously in a few weeks with Mr. Hurt. I'm going to bring you on right after that. So I'm excited to be able to do that. Maybe few other memories and such. So congratulations on that. I'm going to give this to you when we're off the air as well. And I'm going to save some of the conversations then for when you come back on, maybe toward the end of May into early June. And I'm going to give you the floor now, Mr. Price. And definitely you've shown why your money bags, why your story was one that I enjoyed getting a chance to showcase on Sportswire Radio. And I want to turn it over to you. Any closing thoughts, anything else you want to plug, share, or say, and the floor is yours.
I just want to say for any athlete out there, not just basketball players, um, somebody out there always has it worse than you. Any situation you in, somebody out there always has it worse than you that made it work. So just don't stop. If you really want it, continue to do it. Continue to work your hardest on it, and you're gonna get the best results.
Couldn't have said it better. And if you want to follow Tavon, you can do that here on Instagram, taypay._. So very simple, short, sweet, and to the point. If you do a search on YouTube, you can find his mixed video that is still out there. You can also watch him as a part of the York Cardinals men's basketball teams. There is YouTube footage up from matchups at home, also matchups against Brooklyn College, also the John Jay College Athletics page. You can watch the John Jay York games as well at home from the Doghouse, and you can find out why Tavon Price was a 1,000-point scorer, also taking his place into the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, and why we honored him on this day by giving him his own day. My friend, congratulations on the success, but I can promise you the chapter is far from written when it comes to the book of Tavon Price. There is many chapters ahead in this game of basketball. I can't wait to talk about them, and I can't wait for you to take your place into the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame alongside a who's who of people, not just in the world of wrestling, of other sports. And thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being a part of All Sports Matters, and can't wait to see you back on here next month.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. That was Tavon Price, 1,000-plus point scorer, played for the SUNY Adirondack men's basketball team, SUNY Morrisville, and famously for those York Cardinals men's basketball teams, which reached the CUNY Athletic Conference playoffs in the men's basketball tournament in 2022 and 2023. He also was a part of the team in 2022, which had their best season in nearly 8 years. They won 13 games in the regular season, won a playoff game in the CUNY Athletic Conference, reached the playoffs the next year in 2023, had home playoff games back-to-back years, and Tavon Price is also the NJCAA Player of the Week back in February of 2020. He was also first in his region in points, second in the nation, scored 30-plus points, 6 consecutive games, averaged 28-plus points per game in that 1920 season. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice of all wrestling and all sports, where all sports matters. If you're on Sportswire Radio, you're going back to your regular scheduled programming. If you're on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, I'll be here tomorrow night with Jack Spade of Resurrection Wrestling. He's got a lot to say. And until then, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. On the number one collaboration that is Sportswire Radio, where all sports and all wrestling matters. And please support all of our great basketball players in D3 and also NJCAA and HVIAC and USCAA. And please support the York Cardinals men's basketball team. Check them out on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. And thank you, everybody, and good night.